Okay, so in this particular video, we're going to be looking at roughly about grade 3 GCSE. This one is based on fractions, but it's actually specifically multiplication of fractions. So it's a combination of theory and also word problems as well. If you're not sure about anything, always add a comment. I look forward to seeing you inside the video.
Okay, so just a quick note before we continue. If you require any additional support, please visit 3minutemaths.co.uk. You can search for any GCSE Maths topic or search by grade, and if you click on any of the links, that will take you through to a particular post. So this one is how to answer maths indices questions. There are links through to the questions, the answers, and a walkthrough video as well. You can also remain on the YouTube channel, and all of the resources are within the YouTube channel and descriptions below each of the videos. Hope that's useful to you. Hi, so in this particular worksheet, it's aimed at roughly about grade 3. We're going to have a look at multiplying fractions, and then towards the end of the worksheet there are some word problems. If you're not sure about anything, as always, please do add a comment below. I'll always come back to you. So the common way of multiplying fractions is just simply to multiply across. So in this particular case, what I've got is 1/4 multiplied by 1/2. So 1 times 1 is equal to 1, and 4 times 2 is equal to 8. So I can write that as 1/8. So it's fairly straightforward at that sort of level. Let's have a look at the next one. Now this one is going to be 1 times 4, which is 4, and 4 times 9, that is 36. Now you might spot that actually I can reduce this fraction. Now it doesn't implicitly say that within the question itself, but it's a good habit to get into, that if I divide the top by 4, I get 1. If I divide the bottom by 4, I get 9. So the answer to that particular question is 1/9, although you will get the 2 marks for 4/36 unless it says anything different. Let's have a look at the next one. Please do stop the video, have a go at each of these questions. So we've got 3 times 4, well that's going to equal 12, and then 4 times 9 is going to equal 36. Again, I can reduce this by dividing top and bottom by 12. So divide the bottom there by 12, I'm going to get 3, and the top by 12, I'm going to get 1, and that would be the answer to that particular question. Okay, so in terms of just straightforward fractions, it's really a case of just multiplying across, and I'm sure there's plenty of practice to be had on those sorts of things. Let's have a look when it's mixed numbers. So in mixed numbers, the difficulty with it is that we need to convert those then to improper fractions. The way to do that, if I look at that 1 3/4, I'm going to multiply 1 times 4, and then I'm going to add it to 3. So what I get is 7/4. Multiply 2 times 3 on the next one, and then add it to 2. So that's going to give us 8/3, because 2 times 3 is 6, and then plus 2 is going to be 8. Okay, so what we could do if we wanted to is simply multiply straight across, which is what I've done before, and say that's 56/12. Now then you need to know your times tables. How many 12s go into 56? Well, there's 4 of them, and then it's a remainder 8. So that would become 8/12. Then if you're feeling particularly good about these things, you should reduce it down to that being equal to 4 2/3. Okay, so it's a bit of a process, particularly going from here to here. So I'm just going to give you another alternative, which is something that I use a lot in my own calculations, in that rather than doing the reduction after the calculation, I actually do the reduction before the calculation. So let me give you an example. So what I've got is 7/4 multiplied by 8/3. Now I've noticed that 4 and 3 can be divided by 4, so I can just make that simply 7 times 2, which is 14, divided by 3, and 3 goes into 14 4 times, which is 12, and then I've got 2/3 left over. So I can very quickly do this by doing the reduction first. So it doesn't always work on every single one, but if you do spot that there is a reduction to be had, it's always a good thing, always a good idea to do it, in my opinion. Okay, let's have a look at the next one. So I've got 1 2/4, so that's actually going to be okay, so that's going to be 8/4. and I'm going to multiply that by 2 times 10 is 20, plus 3 is going to be 23 over 10. Okay, now there's not a lot I can do with this other than I've spotted that the 8 and the 10 can be divided by 2, so therefore I'm going to divide that by 2. I'm going to give me 4, and that will give me 5. So effectively I end up with 4 times 5 is 20 at the bottom, and then 23 times 4 at the top is going to give me a value of 92. Now, just for the purposes of video, I'm not doing all of my calculations directly on the screen, but hopefully you can, if you wanted to, you could do 23 times 4 at the side here, and that would be 2. 1 remainder, and that would be 9. Okay, so that's what I'm doing kind of off the screen. Now, 92 divided by 20 is slightly more problematic. What I would be inclined to do is to say, well, the easiest way is that if I divide top and bottom by 2, what I actually get is 46 over 10. Well, 46 over 10 is exactly the same as saying 4 wholes and 6 tenths, if you like 4.6, and that will then reduce to 4 3/5, and that would be the answer to that particular question. So a little bit more problematic, but we are looking at some sort of higher value questions here. They are grade 3 type questions. Okay, so let's move on then to question number 6, and I'm going to use exactly the same principle. Let's see if there is any form of reduction we can do. If there isn't, then that's perfectly fine as well. Okay, so 2 times 4 is 8, plus 1 is going to be 9 over 4, multiplied by 15 plus 3 is going to be 18 over 5. Okay, so let's have a look, and can I do something? Yes, I can. I can make that 2, and I can make that 9. So that's going to give me 9 times 9 is 81, divided by 10, and that's going to be therefore 8 wholes and 1 over 10, and that would be the answer to that particular question. So fairly straightforward if you do that reduction first. Okay, let's have a look then at question number 7. So on question number 7, I've got 3 and 8 12s. Okay, I've got a feeling that should actually be 2 and 8 12s. I'm so sorry. So 2 and 8 12s. Well, that's going to give me 2 times 12 is going to be 24. 24 plus 8 is going to be 32 over 12, and I'm going to multiply that by 3. Okay, just for the sake of just my working, what I'm going to do is, rather than write it as 3, I'm going to write it as 3 over 1. It's exactly the same value, it just makes my life a little bit easier because now I can reduce again. So what I end up with is 32 times 1, which is equal to 32, divided by 4 times 1, which is equal to 4, and 32 divided by 4 is actually 8 wholes, and that's the answer to question number 7. Okay, question number 8 is really more about short division and multiplication than it is about dealing with fractions. Yes, it can be done, but because they are bigger numbers, it's kind of much easier to say, well, what I'm going to do is I've got 2/3 of, in maths means multiply, 168 divided by 1. Okay, so what I'm going to do on this particular one is I'm going to divide the 168 by 3, and then I'm going to multiply by 2, because the calculation then becomes a little bit easier. How many 3's are there in 168? So therefore I can just use my short division. I'm going to get 56, and then that would be equivalent effectively to 1/3 of 168, but because I want 2/3 of 136, what I'm going to do then is I'm going to do 56 times 2, and that's going to give me 112. So my final answer is 112. Okay, so slightly different way of doing things, but really all of these ways in which you can do these are equally valid. If you wanted to, you could just simply do 2 times 168 and then divide that by 3, but I suspect it's just a little bit easier to divide by 3 first because it's all interchangeable. Okay, let's move on to 5/6 of 3000. Well, again, that really means 5 over over 6 multiplied by 3,000. Again, I'm going to divide that by 1. So what I'm going to do in this particular case is I'm going to work out 3,000 divided by 6, which would give me 1/6 of 3,000. Then I'm going to multiply that by 5. So 6 into 3,000, well, that's fairly straightforward. That's going to be 500. Okay, and then I want 5 lots of that, so it's going to be 500 multiplied by 5, which is going to be 2,500, which is the answer to that particular question. Okay, let's move on to question number 10. Slightly more problematic, but only because it's a slightly awkward number. I'm going to say, well, I want 6/7 times 448, therefore 7 into 448. Okay, so I need to know my times tables fairly well. 7 into 44 is 6, because 6/7 are 42. I've got 2 left over, that gives me 4. Okay, and that would give me effectively 1/7 of 448 is going to be 64. I actually want 6/7, so I'm going to do 64 multiplied by 6, and that's going to give me 384, which is my final answer to this particular question. Okay, hopefully that's all right for you. Let's move on then to some actual word problems. Now, these do follow the same principles of multiplication. All of these problems on this particular worksheet are about multiplication, but they are varying levels of difficulty, particularly towards the end. But hopefully it'll give you a really good exercise in working through these sorts of questions. So Susie picked 7/10 of the raspberries in her garden. She used 2/5 of the raspberries to make some jam. Okay, so in other words, what she used is 2/5 of 7/10. So the fraction of the garden's raspberries we use to make the jam is going to be that amount. Okay, now in this particular case, I've got 2 and 10 there, so I'm going to multiply or divide through by 2. That's going to give me 5, so that's going to be 7 over 25, which is the answer to that particular question. Okay, let's move on then to number 12. Sometimes with these it is a little bit about understanding the wording. So at an amusement arcade, 2/5 of the games are racing games, 2/3 of the racing games are car racing. What fraction of the amusement arcade games are car racing? Okay, so in this particular case what we're saying is it's actually 2/3 of 2/5. Okay, so fairly straightforward to work out. That's going to be 4 over 15, and that would give you 2 marks for that particular question, but a lot of it is understanding the actual English in the first place. Okay, let's have a look at the next one then. A rectangular garden's a length of that and a width of that. Work out the area. Okay, so effectively we've got a rectangular garden. That's going to be 7 2/3 of a metre, and that's going to be 2 1/4 of a metre. So to work out the area, basically we're saying 7 2/3 multiplied by 2 1/4. How do we do that? Well, we turn them firstly into top-heavy fractions. So that's going to be 7 times 3 is 21, plus 2 is going to be 23 over 3, and then 2 times 4 is 8, plus 1 is 9, so that's going to be 9 over 4. Okay, I'm looking for ways in which I can make my calculation easier, so that 3 and the 9 can be reduced, so that's going to be 1, that's going to be 3. So that's really going to give me 23 times 3, which is 69, divided by 1 times 4 is going to be 4. Okay, so a little bit of short division to do here. 4 into 69, well, that's going to be 1, and then I've got 2 left over, so 4 into 29 is going to be 7. So 7 4s are 28, and I got remainder 1. So basically that's going to work out at 17 and 1 out of 4 meters squared, and that would be the answer to that particular question. Okay, let's move on to the final 2 questions on this particular worksheet. Please do stop the video, have a go at each of these questions, compare your solutions, and also if you're not sure about anything, always add a comment. I'll always come back to you. Okay, so Julianne spends 1¼ hours on her homework each night, Monday to Friday. So in other words, she works on her homework for 5 nights. Okay, Mahi spends 50 minutes on her homework every night of the week, so that's 7 nights. So let's have a look at Julianne. So what is Julianne doing in terms of overall work? Well, that's going to be 1 1/4 multiplied by 5. So therefore I can write that as 5/4 times 5/1. I can't reduce anything, but I can multiply that through as 25/4. 25 divided by 4 is 6, and then I've got 1 left over. So in other words, she spends 6 1/4 hours per week on her homework. Okay, so let's have a look at Mahi. Now this is a very typical question where they've just made it a little bit confusing because they've used 50 minutes. Okay, well 50 minutes is exactly the same as a fraction as saying 50 out of 60 minutes in terms of hours, and bearing in mind we are comparing hours, so it's 50 out of 60 hours, and I'm going to multiply that by 7. So if I multiply that by 7, I'm going to be 7/1. That's going to give me 350 divided by 60. Now it does look a little bit difficult to do, but if you divide through top and bottom by 10, what we actually get is saying that's the same as 35/6. And actually in that particular case we can do a short division. We can say how many times does 6 go into 35? Well, that's going to be 5. 6 is a 30, and then I've got a remainder of 5. So basically Mahi now spends 5 hours and 5/6, okay, or rather 5 5/6 of an hour. So therefore the person that spends the most time on homework is going to be Julianne. Okay, and that would be the answer to that particular question. Okay, so a little bit more problematic, but hopefully you're able to kind of follow through as we've been working through that one. Final question on this is going to be Mr. Richmond, and he wants to paint the wall of his house. The wall measures that. Okay, so each can of paint will cover 20 meters. How many cans of paint? Well, we need to work out the meterage of the wall itself, which is going to be 8 5/8 multiplied by 10. Okay, that's not really much use to us. What we need to do is convert it to a top-heavy fraction. So that's going to be 8 times 8 is 64, plus 5 is going to be 69/8 multiplied by 10/1. Okay, can I do anything with that? Well, yes I could, but I think just for the sake of this particular one I'm going to make it a little bit simpler on myself. I'm actually going to say I've got 69 times 10, which is much easier to work out, I think, than if I'd have done 69 times 5 and divided by 8 as well. So that's going to be 690 divided by 8. Okay, I can do a little bit of short division in that particular one. Okay, well, 8's into 690, 8's into 69 are 8 8's are 64, and then I've got 5 left over. 6 8's are 48, and I've got a remainder of 2. So basically the amount of area that Mr. Richmond needs to cover is going to be 86, and it's 2 out of 8 meters, which is exactly the same as saying 86 1/4 meters squared worth of wall. Okay, now each of the cans of paint covers 20 meters squared. Okay, so rather than dividing 86 1/4 by 20, which is not really necessary for this, and bearing in mind it is a non-calculator worksheet, so what I would do is say, well, actually if I had 4 cans, that would equal 80 meters squared. Well, that's too little for me because I need 86 1/4, therefore I need to buy 5 cans required. Okay, and although he's going to have a little bit left over, it's better for him to have, he's going to have to buy it whether he likes it or not. Okay, so A is going to be 5 cans required. Then it says each can of paint costs £16.99. How much will it cost for Mr. Richmond to paint his house? Well, that's going to be fairly straightforward. £16.99 multiplied by 5. Now, just a little bit of a bit of advice here is that where you've got a decimal point in, what I would do is I would leave it as pennies, and I would just do the calculation 1699 1699 multiplied by 5, and then put the decimal place in afterwards. Okay, although on this particular question it's not going to have any effect, it does sometimes where you've got 2-digit multiplication. So I will post about this at some point in the future. So that's going to be 8,495 pennies, which is going to be a total price of £84.95 for Mr. Richmond to buy the paint to paint the side of his house. Okay, hopefully that's okay for you.
Okay, so hopefully that was blah, blah, blah. I'll start that again. Hopefully that was useful to you. If you're not sure about anything, always a comment below. I'll come back to you. Subscribe to the site. Have a look at some of the other videos. I look forward to seeing you next time.